How do I make cubes cool? Hi guys, so over the last few months I've been working on something pretty cool. They're called mechanism cubes and I designed them as little example prints that you can collect and display. The idea was that if I could show people how to CAD and print these simple mechanisms, it would encourage them to add them to their own projects. I think for a lot of people mechanical design can be really daunting, but in reality complex machines are just made up of lots of really simple and intuitive mechanisms. Mechanisms which I want to demonstrate with these mechanism cubes. I have a problem though. The cubes on their own are not that interesting. They serve their purpose, sure, but it's not that intuitive to see how these simple mechanisms can be combined to create something cool. So here's the plan. I want to take some of the simple mechanisms I've shown in my previous cubes and combine them into a new cube that does, well, something. I want it to be the same size as my old cubes and also be print in place, ideally without the need for supports or any fancy print settings. Simple, right? But what the heck could it be? That's when I remembered a toy that I used to be fascinated with when I was working as a toy designer. It was small, had a ton of intricate mechanisms, and transformed into a variety of really awesome things. Back again. These little mechanical wonders are the perfect starting point. All I have to do is change the base shape from a sphere to a cube. Simple, right? So I've got my brief, I've got my idea, and I've got a starting point. I now want to create some kind of cool little robot, and the first thing I'm going to do is get some inspiration images of, well, you guessed it, cool little robots. The cubier the better. Now, with my inspiration images collected, I can evaluate which designs or silhouettes would be the most suitable. I tried to break down the mechanical elements of the images to see how the robots would actually move and articulate in real life. I then tried to imagine how these shapes could rotate and fold up, evaluating the general area that each limb or body part would take up out of the cube's overall volume. Once I had the basic mechanics of a few different limbs worked out, I started combining them to create my own designs in CAD. I began with my base cube, splitting it into the different areas that each limb would take up. This allowed me to focus on each one of those areas in turn, making sure that that part of the mechanism worked before moving on to the next. It also limited the amount of complexity I had to deal with at any one point, making the whole process far less daunting. Once I had created all of the limbs, I went through and turned them into joints so that I could check how the cube would open out, making sure no areas were intersecting with one another. Finally, with all the basic mechanics worked out, I went through and added in styling to the cube, cutting away from the volumes that I had left. Before long, I had created my first BoxBot, got it printed, and to my surprise, it actually worked. This was probably one of the most complex and satisfying models that I'd ever created, and at this point I was hooked. The tight design constraints actually made it really fun to come up with new designs, and over the course of a couple of weeks, I'd created a whole range of little boxy robots. They were almost exclusively made using hinges and ball joints, and that got me thinking, what other cool things could be created utilising some other common mechanisms? With that in mind, I created this little tank that has a print-in-place cam and follower to move the cannons when you roll it across the table. This is just one example I came up with, but I think there's definitely potential for a whole range of awesome little BoxBots that can do all kinds of cool things. I hope you've enjoyed seeing me make these little contraptions, and I hope it inspires you to explore some mechanisms in your own projects. If you want to unlock your 3D printing potential, check out some of our other courses at weareprintlab.com.